Hey, everybody, and welcome back for another edition of Email Never Sleeps. And today's topic is an interesting one. We've titled it Using AI as Your Email Marketing Team. And with me today, I've got a really special guest, Jonathan Gallos. I don't know why I'm mispronouncing things today, but that's okay. Jonathan, tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, company you work for, and then we'll just sort of jump right into the topic.
Yeah, sounds good. Thanks for having me, Andrew. And yeah, you got the pronunciation perfect on the pre-roll. Just meeting jitters.
There you
But yeah,
go.
so thanks for the quick intro. I'm Jonathan Gallos, and I'm the senior product growth manager at Disqo, which
Mhm.
is a consumer experience platform that connects businesses with the feedback and data of millions of consumers, essentially. And the goal is just to provide businesses with data around members' attitudes, behaviors, opinions, and allow them to make actions, based on that data. Things
Sure.
around ad spend, marketing strategies, product development. So that's much more in the space where Disco is. My role is focused on the consumer facing side and engaging
Okay.
the millions of active members who participate in the survey and insights platform, working on things like growth strategy and audience management for the
Yeah.
email and push notification channels, where we do about 1 million emails per day or 25 to 30 million a month. And I guess just for like background for your audience, that's our strategy is pretty much one third broadcast style and the remainder automation flows based on different user actions and segmentation.
Cool.
So that's kind of my current role. A lot of my just background and interest obviously is not just in email and engaging users for a fun experience. It's fun to test things as the email marketer,
Right.
but also this topic really stuck out to me just on AI is a huge general topic, and where does it make sense to actually use it in
Yep.
your email marketing tool set? Actually,
Yep.
beyond just a buzz.
Yeah. And it's funny because, so caveat everybody, AI is a hot topic. It's often misunderstood, especially in the sort of the email space. And, believe it or not, if you've been in the email space for more than, I don't know, a couple of years, chances are you've probably used AI and haven't even noticed it. We hear the term AI and how it sort of fits into marketing in general, or if it's a large language model like a GPT, or other ways, or I've seen it where it's been advertised for specific point solutions as, we use AI in our cold email tools, or we use AI to do this or that. And there's often misinterpretations of what it does. And, Jonathan and I, before having the actual live podcast, we talked at length a little bit about point solutions and how you sort of integrate AI just into your email team to sort of maybe simplify the process or the production it takes to get out of there. So, Jonathan, I'd love for you to just kind of give your interpretation of, we picked this topic together, but I know you've got a very solid view on just how AI should be used for email, for all email marketers out there.
Yeah, definitely. And there's definitely a pessimistic, I guess, thing to be cautious of or area to be
Yeah.
cautious of, which you touched on with, an example use case of like spinning up cold emails, right? So I think, yeah, while it's been around for a while and definitely hot as a, potential topic the last 2 years or so, I
Mhm.
think one of the potential pitfalls, like you can have with any sort of tool in your tool set for marketing or analysis, is kind of, using it in an ad hoc manner for certain pieces of how you're doing strategy. You mentioned cold emails, right? So, if you're essentially using a GPT style approach for just kind of like one-offs in your
Yeah.
approach,
Yeah.
I think the pitfall there is that on the recipient experience side, a lot of it ends up being the same because these are all trained on models which are based off of maybe 10 to 20 different articles, top pieces across the internet that are most well supported. So you have this issue of kind of not sounding like yourself or
Yeah.
not sounding like your brand voice.
Right.
So going into this direction of avoiding those ad hoc use cases, which maybe is like the quickest and easiest way to try using a GPT or Claude like system, to more something where the AI, whether it's like a standalone solution or in the future some large language model, actually takes into
Mhm.
account a lot more of your context, is a lot
Mhm.
more useful because then you can still kind of be in the space of differentiating your content, to your recipients, your flows, and still using AI to speed up your own workflow without just kind of going this cookie cutter approach.
Totally. Yeah, and I want to touch on cold emails for a second. And I know you mentioned sometimes that's a bad word, and or maybe just has a negative connotation. There are tools out there today, and I haven't subscribed to it yet, but I get a ton of cold email on my email addresses. But there are tons of, well, not tons, but I know that there are some tools out there that's able to identify whether or not the email itself, the copy itself, was written by AI. And I find that really interesting for today. And so I think any company out there that's just leveraging, hey, we have AI built in to write cold emails, I think you're probably going down the wrong path. I could be wrong. It could be extremely successful, but know that there are tools that identify that. And I use AI for copy, whether it's for subject lines or whether it's for blog posts or whether it's for emails, just in general. I'm actually partial to Bard these days, partly because they give me three options, right, to choose from. And then I massage it a little bit, but I initially write it to do it. But, if we start talking about the use of AI in email, right? We've known for years there's companies like Phrasey, who I'm a very big fan of, that uses AI to power subject line optimization, right?
Mhm.
Large language models, tone, feel, things of that nature. And then there are other point solutions that look at, hey, what's the performance been for many years? I'm curious, if you had well, you do have an audience, you have an open audience right now. What are we talking about? Point solutions? Are we talking about just general use of AI? Like, how does one email marketer say, well, how am I going to improve my workflow or my process to get an email out the door? Shorten that time to get the email out the door. What would your recommendation be?
Yeah, so definitely going to point solutions because again, it should be something that's a little bit customized to your specific use case, your specific workflow, your specific audience.
Yeah.
Now, there is one platform that I've kind of been looking into, not like directly utilizing it, but looking into that looks like it is developing into
Okay.
being that. I guess we'll touch on that on like the later end, but for right
Yep.
now, I think like for like what can people do today. My
Yep.
approach is to kind of try to build honestly your own point solution out of your preferred tool. The best tool is the one that you use, right? The one you get
Yeah.
most comfortable with. And while there's different rankings and in terms of AI intelligence, things like Claude, Bard, Gemini, the way I
Hmm.
think it's figuring out what your workflow is, and
Yeah.
as far as and kind of like integrating it in different multiple phases of that workflow, whether it's the initial ideation, copywriting. Again, once you just have an instance up and running of any of these tools, the more
Yeah.
context you get, the more background, the more kind of like ways you're iterating it, the better the output gets. Because kind of to your point with these things like subjectline.com, all those,
Mhm.
they're based off of a great historical set of data and things like that, and so they definitely help non-experienced people at speed. But
Mhm.
again, I think the risk is that you end up not necessarily sounding like it was AI generated, but you end up sounding like it's boring, which is worse,
Yeah.
right? Because then you're boring in the
Yeah.
inbox. People are confused, or they think I saw that subject line from some other cold email, or even other
Yeah.
brand like 2 or 3
Yeah.
days ago. They just kind of ripped it off, right? You
Yep.
want things to come across as unique because you have a few seconds to capture their attention. Otherwise, they're just going to ignore it. People have a busy life, and
Mhm.
so kind of in my like thought process has been the challenges that both in my own like previous experience before I started using AI and kind of getting a lot more familiar with it, as well
Mhm.
as different email friends who are in the industry or run their own agencies. A
Mhm.
lot of email marketing teams do spend up to 3 quarters of the time on copywriting, from ideation, drafting to final edits, and it is a
Mhm.
big process. For the most part, then they only have a remaining small portion of their time left over for actual tuning, testing, and iterating.
Mhm.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think that's really where AI can be used as your writing agent kind of
Yeah.
to your use case as well, Bard. Don't think that it's going to be, just drop in a file. It gives you the perfect thing out of it. You got to massage it. You got to work with prompts and definitely,
Mhm.
obviously, if anyone follows me on LinkedIn, I'll drop things here and there as far as just useful prompts to help massage, your LLM of choice into being an agent for you based off your background, based off what your email goal is. But in
Sure.
doing that, you're basically leveraging AI as your copywriting agent, so it can help with that initial ideation drafting. Say, hey, give me 3 ideas based off this, and then
Mhm.
okay, cool, based off your context of your company or whatever you're doing for your campaign,
Yeah.
feed it some more context and say, hey, develop this further down that pipeline. So at least you spend 20 minutes with it, but that's certainly faster than you, I don't know, sitting down for an hour, kind of dribbling ideas and maybe getting to the first piece. Because I think by doing it, that's just an example of like kind of like the front end of the flow, ideation and drafting, right? By
Right.
doing that, you end up whether you're a solo email marketer or working with a kind of a small team, you
Yep.
end up opening a lot more of your time for just, throwing stuff at the wall, seeing what stuff doesn't work, throw it in the
Hmm.
trash, right? Finding the kind of those key points that work, and then spending most of your time actually testing, iterating, optimizing, which is honestly, at least for me as like a, technical marketer or product growth manager, it's the more fun place to be than just writing content. So, you
Hmm.
might as well use AI for things that you're not so great at and focus on things that you are great at.
Yeah, and I want to apologize to our audience. I use the word Bard, and it's actually Gemini now, and it just kind of shows
Oh yeah, I wasn't even thinking
I
about
still
that.
have it. I still have it bookmarked as Bard, believe it or not, and it hasn't switched over. But and anyway, mea culpa. But we've got marketers or email marketers that have approached me and have asked, "Hey, how do you use AI for image generation?" And I tried it for a little bit and was messing around with a couple of different tools. And for some reason, I couldn't get past, if you're very prescriptive in what you put in for image generation to stick inside your emails, rather than go to stock imagery, which we all know when stock imagery is used, right? It always seems like the Hunger Games, like people, right? Like these like futuristic people, like even if you put like person standing next to a mailbox, right? It always sort of seems like the image generate, at least from my perspective, and maybe an AI purist can come after me and say something completely different. I just found it to be odd. I've seen it on some odd websites where you just kind of feel that. And you know what, folks? I mean, even if, and maybe somebody's going to argue with me on this, but if you've been using dynamic content, whether it's images or offers based off of demographics, or whether they're or psychographics or previous purchase history, you're using AI, right? In its most infant form, you're using it. And oftentimes we as marketers talk to email marketers and they're like, yeah, well, we kind of use dynamic content every once in a while. Typically, it's the standard postcard. Here's the deal, 60% off if you're an e-tailer, or something that's, if you're a publisher, you're doing a headline plus a subheading. And the goal is to drive to drive the click. And I get it, right? But I think, when you talked about the use of copywriting and maybe to either test shortened or lengthened copywriting, copy, because it does take a while sometimes for marketers to put that together, or they're running around in circles, right, at their organization, whether you're small or large, to get approvals and sign-offs on the use of these particular words. And if you're able to use prompting correctly, right, you can get down to the actual tone of what you want it to be. And so don't think, I want to make sure for the audience, don't think that there's some like major AI solution out there for email marketing that's going to do it all for you. And you're just going to be able to kind of sit back and say, send an offer to this, to that, to the other thing. I mean, it does take work. There's no silver bullet here, unless I'm missing something, Jonathan, that I don't know about. I don't think that there's a silver bullet for the use of AI holistically in email just yet. Is it coming?
Yeah.
Maybe. I'm not sure.
Yeah,
But
potentially that topic is an interesting one because you come to this topic of like press a button and have it do it all for you, right?
yeah.
And so there's even like I guess the opposite side of that where kind of the experienced users, the ones who have their own brand, maybe their own small business, or the ones who are kind of really experienced in the role. Maybe they've been a few years at their company and they know kind of
Yeah.
overall strategy, direction, and stuff. They want to
Yeah.
have at least that final mile to tinker with things, make their adjustments, make their reviews. They don't want to assume that like, well, their job's gone and it's just AI running their entire
Yeah.
uh, you know strategy for them.
Yeah.
So on this topic of like point solutions, one that is kind of in that area, and the one I've been involved in is a platform called Mailberry. Funny name,
Oh,
but
okay.
catchy. Yeah,
Yeah.
Mailberry.
Yeah.
And so they kind of started off in a very similar area of kind of like ad hoc using AI, obviously because it's essentially like an ESP, and you could also deploy campaigns with it. And it was
Mhm.
using bits of AI, which I think you've seen in almost any platform you use nowadays, whether it's Braze or whatever you guys are using.
Mhm.
But what they really developed into is trying to use AI more as agents, for specific pieces of the email marketing flow, things that are typically a little bit annoying internal processes,
Yeah.
email strategy, segmentation, the more manual processes.
Mhm.
So the goal is, I think, is essentially going to make, an email point solution where it is your marketing agency or a piece of like that marketing agency with a couple different core pieces, but you are still the driver. You are still kind of like the person submitting the initial
Mhm.
brief, looking at like this, initial progress, making final
Mhm.
reviews. And so kind of in that, obviously I'm tracking along with that. Then that's probably
Yeah.
on the road for in a year because they're
Yeah.
heavily working with a couple kind of close internal clients right now.
Yep.
But on the road to that, I think it is this thing, kind of like you touched on, where you kind of have to make almost like your prompt library
Yep.
based off what things like tone, things like an example I use is when you're feeding AI, just try to get initial ideas out. Give it examples of your previous winning subject lines or your previous winning call to action buttons. Give it actual context there.
Hmm.
Because, I mean, yeah, obviously, I don't have to tell you, or probably the vast majority of your audience, obviously, personalized emails deliver better click-through rates
Yeah,
and
sure.
and all that. But at the same time, at least from a recent study, I saw like 70% of brands are still failing to utilize them. I think that was from Experian or something. So
Hmm.
I think by using some of these at least pro AI tools, like it's
Yep.
Gemini, I definitely could do it with Claude. Most of them are multimodal, and so you could not just put in text, but put in like a CSV file of example of hey, like here's my last 20 campaigns, kind of like look at
Hmm.
them, tell me which kind of like factors are standing out to you as being like the ones with the highest click-through rates, the ones with the highest open rates, maybe like the highest like negative engagement, highest spam rates. So that
Hmm.
way you start to kind of build this thing where it does take a lot of upfront work, but you're doing a lot of upfront work anyways with copywriting and maybe like you said, running around circles, getting reviews.
Hmm.
So being able to build some sort of like couple templates, prompt library of like what you prefer for writing guides, formatting
Hmm.
guidelines. Hey, like how do I want my emails to sound like written at a sixth grade level without jargon and stuff like that. And once you get to that, you get to really a nice, honestly templatized place where it feels like you do have an agent on your side where all you're feeding it with each new campaign is, hey, here's my new campaign, here's what the goals are, here's like what my audience are, people who recently maybe abandoned their cart, didn't do this, or maybe they recently
Yep.
purchased.
Right.
And so then, you're like, you have a much more thing where it's evolving with you. And I think that's eventually where we're going to get to. Now we'll see if it actually gets
Yeah.
fully there.
Right.
Again, I don't think at the end of the day, it's going to be a complete do it yourself. Cause ideally, even at like, that's the entrepreneur level,
Yeah.
like once entrepreneurs, like, let's say go to like an ad agency, they probably want to still have some level of top level
Right.
control. It's not just complete do it yourself. So it is interesting where it's getting to. I think it's not there yet, but for those
Yep.
who do honestly want to speed up a lot of their time, I think there is this kind of pathway to building your prompt library, building like an improved process on your site. And it could be used for copy, to analyze
Tons.
data, or just, basic ideation if you're at a bit of like writer's block, which we all get to.
Right. I will take off my marketer's hat for a second and put on my technology CTO-ish hat. I was on a panel recently with a couple of CTOs, and the topic of AI and the use of AI, whether across any digital channel, especially around marketing. And I won't remember his name, but I remember the quote: "Anything that you do, anything that you put, is out there forever." And so when you use a tool, whether it's to upload something or whether it's to write copy or whether it's to generate images or you get more advanced prompts, that's how it learns. That's how the machine learns. And so if it's proprietary information to your organization, my first recommendation would be is if you don't honor a contract with them or how they utilize that data, if it's a point solution, or if you're just using a general AI solution like GPT or Gemini, you best make sure it's okay with your privacy and compliance department because you could get caught in a really sort of thing. So that's my fear, uncertainty, and doubt of a little bit because everyone's jumping on this AI thing, and every email conference I see, there's sessions on it and trainings on it and what's the future hold, but we're not really looking at what it is today. I think it's a tremendous use to save your time. One of the recommendations I have as a former agency owner is to say, what's causing you the most time where AI could solve? Is it writing copy? Is it writing subject lines? Is it the analyzation of data and the ability to make decisions based off of that data? It's certainly not about like, well, how clean is my list and is the email addresses that I have valid? Those are separate services. I'm talking about like, where does it cost you, right? The most amount of time and what you can do to save it, assuming that you're okay with your privacy attorneys and compliance departments in order to use it. And so that's sort of like my fear hat, right? On all of this is that marketers are going to try to go woo, right, really fast
Completely,
um,
yeah.
to do it. And I attended a session a few years ago with somebody, and a question came from the crowd. It was all about the use of AI in marketing. And someone raised their hand and asked a question, how do I get it? And I'm like, you already have it. Whether or not you guys know, I don't care what email service you use, whether it's iPost or any one of the other many dozens, maybe hundreds of solutions out there. They have AI and they've had AI built in for many years. The question is how are you going to use it? And the extra money that you're going to pay for it or not, is it going to provide value to your organization? So there's many ways to increase an ability to really sort of maximize your workflow. All right, so we're nearing the end. Jonathan, I'd love for you to give 2 or 3 key takeaways for our audience, and then I'll give my final wrap up. So what are your key takeaways that you want to tell everybody?
Well, I guess just leading off of your point there as far as personally identifiable data and private data. Yeah, definitely be careful to not feed it that. Obviously, you use
Yeah,
your own discretion as to what data you're feeding it. Anything that I suggest is typically very above board. Your things like your front end copy, things like that. Definitely make sure if you're tossing in CSVs into any tool, Gemini, what it doesn't have your user list in them,
right.
because that's right. The interesting topic on that, which again is very much forward looking, is eventually I do see larger enterprises building their own localized models, which would house basically your proprietary data. And
Mhm.
once you get to that level of scale, of course, yeah, you could go crazy on obviously analyzing customer profiles and making very very custom segmented stuff. But really, yeah, I think the other point is honestly, people may think that AI is this huge topic, which it is. You see, obviously, multiple articles every single day about it. And so, well, it's, one boat is writing it off as just being another technology, and another
Mhm.
one may just be a little bit apprehensive about using it. Honestly, my advice would be just to kind of get in there and start kind of massaging it, like any tool, utilize it a little bit, because you will find areas, and it takes a bit of work, just like any tool. You'll find areas where it will save you time, honestly, and whether it is on that copywriting analyzing of data, or actual just initial like kind of strategy. Okay, I've done this and it's not giving me the click rates I want. What are some other ideas? If you don't have a full deep context of like email
Yeah,
A to Z, right?
right.
Because I think the goal there is really not to have AI take over your tools as like a writing assistant or as an email marketer, but it's to help you
Mhm.
shift your focus. And honestly, like what I think a lot of teams are, whether it's a small or large team, even is you're still spending so much time on that front end ideation and stuff, and then you end up in this state that I think probably all too many are familiar with, where you have a bunch of flows going and not enough time to actually analyze all of them. So really, you're probably like hyper segmented, hyper flows everywhere, and you're not really getting much
Mhm.
value out of them. And the
Yeah.
only way to really get there, where you could like really optimize for growth, for new ideas, all the fun new ideas, is if you could maybe reduce time on your front end load, right? That ideation and stuff, and spend a lot more of your time with the data, with the ideas, with the tuning.
Mhm.
Because then you could kind of get your email marketing engine for a small or large brand to a place where it's actually somewhat
Yeah.
manageable. And that's really how it's been for me, as far as being able to manage things a lot better with a smaller team, as well as have a lot of fun day to day and execute on new ideas with
Mhm.
using AI, with doing a lot more on the testing side. So yeah, I think it is much about a balance, right? It's not some end all solution that is just going to replace your entire like key piece of the job for you. But it is
Okay.
really fun to get in and just start to leverage, be a little bit involved. Spend 20 minutes a day using whatever tool you want, the free version. And if you want to try, pay $20 a month.
Mhm.
It's a low cost if it helps you save potentially an hour or two of just headache per day.
Mhm.
So yeah, I think it is very much in an exploratory phase right now. And then obviously with any other new tool, keep on being pessimistic, because that'll help you kind of challenge like your own
Yeah.
kind of like questions and not be overly sold on some sort of a snake oil solution.
So I have 2 key takeaways for everybody. First of all, I need everybody to take a step back and look at the program holistically and ask yourself, what sort of problems or challenges am I looking to solve? And does that involve, or should it involve, in the use of AI as we know it today? The second thing, after they take a step back and figure out the challenges and whether or not, the second thing I would ask is, are you as email marketers doing the basics correctly? And can, like, the basics, the blocking and the tackling of email and getting an email out the door and analyzing specific things and looking at the right metrics. And then of those blocking and tackling, can AI help solve it? Whether it's the AI that's built into the Excel spreadsheets today, or something way more advanced in how you do analytics. I think jumping full bore into it, and I think you mentioned that when in your excellent points, Jonathan, was, you know, it's never going to solve everything, but it can solve some things that I think that maybe cause you some stress or some strain along your program. But take it baby steps and don't feel like you've got to dive into it because some key executive is saying we need to involve AI in our email program. No offense to those C-level executives, they may not really completely understand how the email program or how email in general works. And it's your job. It's your job as an email marketer to be the good steward of your email program and to say, what can I focus on that AI can solve? So, Jonathan Gallows, look, man, I was looking forward to recording this thing. I'm glad we did. You had some
Me too.
very valuable points. As always, everybody, we're going to put where you can get a hold of Jonathan on LinkedIn. If you've got additional questions to him or to myself, I'm sure that we're able to answer it. And I know he's more than willing to help out. So we'll have his deets at the end of this podcast. And I wanted to thank everybody again for your continued support of Email Never Sleeps, the way you watch it, the way you interact with us, and really the feedback that you give us. And it's guests like Jonathan, I think, that we bring on that adds a tremendous amount of value. So, Jonathan, thank you again for your time. Really appreciate it. And if you have any questions, anybody, let us know. Thanks again, Jonathan.
Yeah. Thanks again. You have a great one.